My name is David Madison, the 23rd of October 2019. I was a Methodist minister for 9 years, but by the time I finished my PhD in biblical studies, my belief in God had evaporated. I'm an ex-clergy atheist. That wasn't supposed to happen. Seminaries exist to manufacture clergy, but if you look at the Bible too closely, too carefully, its errors and flaws become all too obvious. Hence the title of this series of flash podcasts, Bible Blunders and Bad Theology. This is episode 9. Who invented the Last Supper? Christians may think that this is a silly question. Nobody invented it. Jesus had a Last Supper with his disciples. What's the problem? Well, let's take a close look. The first gospel written was Mark, and here is his account of the Last Supper in chapter 14. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many." Now, Mark's gospel was written some 40 years after the fact, and after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. So where did the author get his information? At the Last Supper, did someone take notes? Were the words of Jesus passed on faithfully with no errors or elaboration for 40 years? There's no evidence for either scenario. There would have been no eyewitnesses, by the way, still around for Mark to do fact-checking. So let's look somewhere else, to Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, in which he writes in chapter 11, "For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you." Now hold that thought. That the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took a cup also after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as oft as you drink it in remembrance of me." This was written some 20 years after the death of Jesus and 20 years before Mark wrote his account. So this is the first account of the Last Supper in Corinthians. Where did Paul get it? He wasn't there. He never met Jesus. He couldn't have looked it up in Mark, which hadn't been written yet. Well, maybe some of the disciples told him about it. No. In fact, Paul says in the first chapter of Galatians, "For I want you to know that the gospel that was proclaimed by me is not of human origin, for I did not receive it from a human source, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ." Uh-oh. And Paul says exactly this when he begins his account of the Last Supper in 1 Corinthians 11. "For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you." This Last Supper scene came to Paul in a vision, one of his hallucinations of the dead man Jesus. So it seems likely that Mark based his account on Paul's account, which came out of Paul's imagination. He thought his visions and hallucinations were much more reliable than any information that he could have gotten from the disciples of Jesus. So, there you have it. This is bad news. It was Paul who invented the Last Supper. It's not history at all. What a blunder.